Clanton. It is written here, you was there. Remember, in these woods is the place of the pocket of Verdenne. The place of a battle that took the life of 2,000 soldiers, German and GIs. And with the US Army, first of all, the 84th Airborne, who defended this place during 5 days and 5 nights. It was a strategic battle. Why? Because, I shall first translate. Il est écrit sur cette plaque que dans cette poche, que l'on a appelée la poche de Verdenne, s'est déroulée une bataille stratégique où 2000 combattants allemands et américains de la 84e division aéroportée de l'armée américaine laissèrent leur vie. Cette bataille fut une bataille stratégique. In 1944 was launched on December the 16th a massive attack called under the name the von Rundstedt attack. Why von Rundstedt? Because von Rundstedt was the General-in-Chief of this part of the German army. This was, we can say, the last battle of Hitler. You remember that on June the 6th was a landing in Normandy. And in December, the war was desperate for the German army. And Hitler decided to launch a massive attack on December the 16th of December. The idea was to take Antwerp. Why Antwerp? Because Antwerp was a harbor, absolutely strategic for the Allied army. It was a place for the US and the English army to land all the material. It was absolutely strategic to land as material, tank, gasoline, soldiers as possible. So the idea of the German army was to cut the US and the UK. So they launched the attack on December the 16th. It was an awful battle. At the first day, the US were absolutely surprised by this army. Nobody had the idea that a massive attack could be launched by the Germans. So it was very difficult for the US at first to resist that massive attack. L'idée de Hitler, dans ces jours désespérés qui ont suivi, dans ces mois désespérés qui ont suivi le débarquement de Normandie, c'était de lancer une attaque massive au mois de décembre pour couper en deux l'armée anglo-américaine et de reprendre le port d'Anvers. Pourquoi Anvers? Parce que Anvers, c'était le port où les armées alliées pouvaient débarquer leurs soldats, leur matériel, l'essence et les tanks. Il était donc absolument stratégique pour Hitler de reprendre Anvers. En ce mois de décembre, personne n'imagine parmi les Alliés que les Allemands peuvent encore lancer une attaque. Donc cette grande attaque, connue sous le nom de offensive von Rundstedt, du nom du commandant en chef allemand, cette grande attaque était absolument insoupçonnée des Anglais et des Américains. Et donc ça a été une grande surprise pour eux. Et les premiers jours des combats furent extrêmement difficiles. We should remember that in the eastern part of Belgium, the attack was absolutely massive, and the German army made a lot of US soldiers prisoners. And it was absolutely awful because the GIs in the eastern part, close to the cities of Verdenne, Stadlo, Malmedy, were slaughtered by the Germans. The Germans made no prisoners at that time. So on December the 20th, the 84th Airborne came here and they took place in the castle and in the village. it was absolutely strategic for them to hold that stronghold, to hold that position. Why? Because coming from Germany, the geography is very hilly. There is a lot of hill and a lot of forest and woods. We should remember that at the time, the sky was absolutely foggy. Impossible for the US to use their planes. And this was good for the German. Why? Because the German had no more planes, but they had a lot of tanks. So the idea was to launch as many tanks and infantry as possible to seize Marche, and after Marche, the ground is more flat and there are not so many woods. So after Marche, it's more easy for the tanks to go and to go ahead. That was basically the idea. Oppositely, for the US, it was absolutely key to keep Verdenne and not to allow the German to go over Marche. So the US Army put a lot of effort to keep Verdenne. They took position here on December the 20th. They go in the castle, and in the castle, that was the center of communication. Les Américains ont donc pris position ici le 20 décembre, dans le château et dans le village de Verdenne. Et il était absolument stratégique pour eux de garder cette position. Venant d'Allemagne, vous aurez noté que la géographie est pleine de collines et de bois. Ceci ralentit l'avancée des chars. Or, les chars constituaient pour l'armée allemande l'arme absolue, si j'ose dire. Ça leur permettait d'avancer rapidement, et une fois Marche conquise, ils pouvaient aller beaucoup plus rapidement. Parce qu'après Marche, il n'y a plus cet ensemble de collines et de bois qui ralentissent la progression des chars. À ce moment-là, nous devons nous remémorer que nous sommes en décembre. Le ciel est absolument bouché, c'est le brouillard complet. Les Américains et les Anglais ne peuvent pas utiliser leurs avions qu'ils ont en masse, alors que les Allemands n'en ont quasiment plus. Les Américains comprennent très rapidement qu'il est absolument essentiel de conserver la position de Verdenne. The US Army stationed in the valley there, and the 20th they go over the hills. They took position in the village and in the castle. During 5 days, from December the 20th to December the 26th, the village and the castle was taken and retaken. Mr. Clanton, I'm the great-grandson of the owner of the castle, Baron Charles de Radziski, and my grandfather was in the cellar of the castle with his daughter and other civilians who took refuge in the cellar. On December the 20th, your fellow of the 84th Airborne took place in the castle, and they established their guns and a communication center with radio to communicate with each other. The first attack took place the day after, and during 5 days and 5 nights, the castle was taken and retaken 5 times. In the cellar, it was my great-grandfather and my grand-aunt and other civilians who took refuge there, and it was also the place for the wounded soldiers to be transported there and to be, well, they took care of them, both German and US people. Le 20 décembre, l'armée américaine prend place ici. Elle établit dans le château de Verdenne son centre de communication. Elle prend place autour du village également de Verdenne. Et ça va être le début de 5 jours de combats acharnés. Mon arrière-grand-père et sa fille seront dans les caves du château de Verdenne, où ils vont vivre 5 jours et 5 nuits d'horreur. Ils seront là avec 14 autres civils. Ils ne bougeront pratiquement pas des caves, et c'est également le lieu où seront transportés les blessés des 2 camps, allemands et américains. We have no idea about the difficulties of this battle. It was a slaughter. We should remember here that 2,000 people were dead at this place. There are incredible stories to be told here. Among others, one day, the US Army, the 84th Airborne, decided to launch a new attack on the village. And they came from the valley. And they took this, they came at this place. And they were told to take one little sentry. But they made a mistake. And they took the other sentry. And it was a night. It was very, very cold. One can't imagine how cold it was. It was awful. Very, very cold. Foggy. The darkness, the absolute darkness. And at a certain time, they were progressing throughout the woods. And the commander of this patrol, he suddenly saw massive things in the woods. And he thought at that time that was US tanks. So he asked one of his soldiers to go to the tanks, friends, supposed friends, and to go with them to go to the village. So that soldier go to the tank, and it was a night. So and he bam on the tank to wake the people up. And one soldier go out of the tank, and he said something in German. It was a mistake. And they suddenly realized that it was a big mistake, and there was a lot of shot. But thanks to God, it was impossible for a tank to lower the cannon, so it was possible for the US to escape, because it was impossible to lower too much the gun. So, ici ont eu lieu des combats absolument terribles pendant 5 jours, où 2000 personnes, 2000 soldats des 2 camps ont perdu leur vie. On peut imaginer à quel point les combats ont été difficiles. Il faut se remémorer que c'était un temps où il faisait extrêmement froid. Quelqu'un m'a dit, à très juste titre, à 4 heures, c'était la nuit ici. Et il faisait froid, il y avait du brouillard, et un jour, les Américains qui avaient logé leur camp de base dans la vallée ont décidé de lancer une attaque. Ils sont passés par ce lieu. Mais ils se sont trompés de chemin. Au lieu de prendre un sentier à gauche, ils ont pris un sentier à droite. Et dans la masse, le commandant de cette escouade a vu des grandes masses noires et il s'est dit, ce sont nos chars à nous, ce sont nos amis. Alors il a envoyé un de ses soldats réveiller les gens, les tankistes, ceux qui étaient dans les chars, pour qu'ils les suivent et conduisent avec eux l'attaque sur le village. L'écoute du char s'est ouverte et on a entendu quelque chose être crié en allemand. C'était une erreur, ce n'étaient pas les chars américains, c'était les chars allemands. Alors évidemment, il y a eu un flux de détonation de part et d'autre. On s'y sont rendus compte de la méprise, mais les Américains ont pu s'en sortir parce qu'il était impossible pour les tanks d'abaisser suffisamment les canons, et donc ils sont passés en dessous des tirs. The village suffered a lot. Inhabitants of the village were in the cellars of the houses after the battle. Nearly almost the houses were destroyed. If you see at the photographies of the time, there was a lot of ruins. The church was destroyed, everything was destroyed because the village was taken and retaken so many times. In the castle itself, I told you that civilians, among others my great-grandfathers, my great-aunt, were in the cellar. They were in the cellar of the castle, and they didn't know who was on the first floor, save that the shoes were different between the German army and the American army. The shoes of the German soldiers were with nails. Okay, so it made a certain noise on the floor. Okay, and the shoes of the U.S. Army was with guns. It was subtle, and so they recognized who was on the first floor thanks to the noise. My great-grandfather and my great-aunt told me that the German soldiers were very, very tough, very hard, and they have no mercy, even between them, even between them. And in the cellar, my great-grandfather saw German soldiers wounded and suffering a lot, and an officer, a German officer, was just shut up. It was incredible. And my great-grandfather told that he needs to be, well, he needs care. He needs water. No water. So my grandfather go out of the house because there was the possibility to have water out of the house, and he took a bucket with water to help him. But the Germans were very harsh, very tough between them. Les combats ont été incroyables dans le château et dans le village. Les habitants ont souffert énormément dans ce village. La moitié des maisons étaient détruites après les combats. L'église, il n'en restait vraiment pas grand-chose. On ne peut pas imaginer combien c'était dur d'être dans ces combats-là. Mon arrière-grand-père, ma grande-tante, avec d'autres civils, étaient dans les caves du château, et on recevait là les blessés, les deux camps. Les Allemands étaient très très durs, et même entre eux. Il y a un blessé allemand qui était là, et évidemment il geignait dans les souffrances. Et un officier allemand passe par là et juste la jeter dedans pour dire « Shut up, tais-toi ». Et mon grand-père a dit « Mais il a besoin de soins, il a besoin d'eau ». Non, pas d'eau. Alors mon grand-père est sorti de la maison, c'était dangereux, il a pris un seau, de l'eau, pour soigner ce blessé. One thing which was very, very difficult for the inhabitants was the noise, because we can't imagine the noise. There were a cannon in the castle, and it was used to cannon the surroundings, and it made a lot of noise. Even at the time, my great father thought that the castle was in fire. No, it was just the noise, but it was not in fire. On ne peut pas imaginer le bruit que cela fait et la terreur que le bruit inspire à tous les habitants du château et du village. C'était absolument épouvantable. Many GIs were in the woods and to protect themselves, they dig in the ground what we call a foxhole. It's just a hole, okay? But to protect you from two things. Of course, the bullets, to protect themselves from the bullets. So the GIs made foxholes to protect themselves from the bullets, and also from the pieces of wood. Why wood? Because if you have a cannonball going through the wood, it made a lot of, how do you call it, splinters?
Yeah, shrapnel.
Shrapnel. And to protect themselves, they had to go in the wood. They had to go in the loophole, in the foxhole, sorry. Pour se protéger, les Américains ont creusé des tas de trous dans le sol pour se protéger à la fois des balles qui étaient tirées par les mitrailleuses, mais aussi par les éclats de bois. On va faire les feux. And I remember many years after, somebody was asking, I don't remember who, but somebody asked me, can we now see some loopholes? And my aunt Anne Radisky told me, yes, it is still possible to look at foxholes. I remember when I was young, there was a lot. And sometimes we were strolling through the woods, and suddenly we were surprised to fall in a foxhole. after the battle, of course, the woods were completely destroyed, and it was impossible to sell the wood. Why? Because it was full of pieces of steel, due to the cannonball, due to the bullets and so on. Les Américains ont donc fait des tas de trous partout pour se protéger des balles de canon, des balles de fusil, des éclats de bois également, parce qu'évidemment lorsque un obus passe, il fait éclater le bois et c'est extrêmement dangereux. How the battle finally, well, how ended the battle? Well, at a certain time, the American understood where were the positions of the German, and they concentrated their cannon. And at a certain time, it was hell on earth, because all of a sudden they decided to bomb that position, and only 600 Germans could escape the woods. But it was awful because there were so many shells on the German position, and only half a dozen of tanks can escape. There were many, and after the war, we can retrieve so many tanks here in the woods, but only half a dozen of tanks, German tanks, escaped because of the concentration of the shells on the German position. Comment est-ce que la bataille a pris fin? Mais à un moment donné, les Américains ont compris où étaient exactement les positions allemandes, et donc ils ont concentré leur tir de canon qui était situé très très loin donc leur tir était situé très loin, et donc ils ont concentré effectivement les coups d'artillerie sur ces positions-là, et ça a été la fin de la poche de Verdenne, et seulement 600 Allemands ont pu s'échapper, et moins d'une douzaine de tanks. So I shall finish my story here, but I shall tell you other things close to the castle. But once again, I would like to say what is so important for us, Mr. Clanton. Je vais terminer ici, je poursuivrai mes explications après au château, mais je voudrais dire le plus important à M. Clanton. Mr. Clanton, you and your fellow soldiers, you came here so many years ago. You was 20, 22. You came from over the ocean, from Texas, and I told you how an American a soldier coming from Texas saved the life of my great-grandfather, my great-aunt, and 14 civilians. You came from over the ocean. Really, you had no reason to come here, but you saved the freedom, you saved the liberty. You help us to act as free men. We are so indebted for all what you and your fellow soldiers have done to us. We owe to you our liberty. So we are so grateful. We so indebted to you and all your fellows who were killed, who were wounded or survived this battle of Verdenne. A lot of thanks. I can't find the words to express our gratitude, Mr. Clanton. So many thanks. Le plus important, c'est de rappeler à Monsieur Clanton et à tout le monde ici autour de nous tout ce que nous devons à Monsieur Clanton et à ses compagnons soldats, ceux qui ont été blessés, ceux qui ont participé, ceux qui n'ont pas survécu à ces combats de Verdenne. Nous leur devons notre liberté. Nous leur devons aujourd'hui de pouvoir être là, d'agir avec toutes nos opinions différentes, mais d'agir en hommes libres. Et M. Clanton et ses compagnons sont venus de l'autre côté de l'océan. Vraiment, eux-mêmes, ils n'avaient aucune raison de venir de l'autre côté de l'océan. Mais ils sont venus chez nous pour nous aider et pour nous donner la liberté. Et ça, c'est la liberté que nous devons à M. Clanton et à tous ses compagnons. Et nous ne pouvons évidemment que leur être immensément reconnaissants. Thank you all. Many thanks. Many thanks. We are so indebted to you. Many thanks. Thank you. Many thanks. And congratulations for being here. Bravo. Congratulations, sir. Bravo. So indebted to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And many thanks for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
are so indebted to you, to all your fellows, and well, we shall always remember you and your fellows. Many, many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I forgot to introduce my aunt Anne, who is still living in the castle. And so, yes, the castle, there is still somebody living in the castle. And thanks to Anne, the castle is still in the family, which is very, very important to us. Mm-hmm. Of course, I know better the fighting here in the castle, because I'm the great-grandson of the inhabitants. But we should remember that there was a lot of fighting in the village itself. We should also remember that in the last days of September 44, the German army was retreating. And there was a fight in the last days of September in the village itself, because some resistance attacked German soldiers. And of course, the German retaliate. And I think it was on September the 25th, the German army retaliate, and they fired, they put fire, can we say that, on 2 houses? They fired some houses in the village. So the first sufferings of the village, it was in late September 44. Alors, j'ai oublié de vous présenter ma tante Anne, qui habite toujours ici, dans cette belle maison. Et nous lui sommes tous reconnaissants parce que c'est grâce à elle que voilà, la famille maintient ses liens avec ce lieu qui est extrêmement important pour nous. Alors, bien sûr, je connais mieux l'histoire et les combats dans le château, puisque c'est mon arrière-grand-père qui y habitait. Mais on doit se rappeler aussi que le village lui-même a subi une attaque. Parce que dans les derniers jours de septembre 1944, l'armée allemande était en retraite et des jeunes résistants ont attaqué un convoi allemand, et bien sûr il y a eu des représailles de l'armée allemande. Je crois que c'était le 25 septembre 1944, et l'armée allemande a alors mis le feu à plusieurs maisons dans le village lui-même. Now you know the story of the fighting of Verdenne, and you can see there the picture of the castle after the fightings, and you can see a lot of shells impact. As said, the castle was taken and retaken 5 times by the German and the US, and after the battle, one of my cousins told that the castle was just good to be destroyed, and it was difficult to rebuild it. After the, je vais traduire. Vous voyez là une photo. Je ne sais plus ce que j'ai traduit. Alors, château. Donc, vous avez là une photo du château de Verdenne. Vous pouvez voir tous les impacts des obus, puisqu'on avait installé des canons dans la maison elle-même et on tirait de la maison. Et en fait, si vous regardez de l'autre côté de la maison, vous allez voir qu'il y a une plaine, et si vous possédez le château, vous possédez la plaine, vous contrôlez la plaine. Après les combats, un de mes cousins a dit que la maison était juste bonne à abattre. So it was absolutely strategic to control the castle, because if you have a look on the other side of the castle, there is a plain. If you control the castle, you control the plain. So it was absolutely strategic. So after the fighting, my great-grandfather, you can see the stage of the castle. So my great-grandfather took refuge in that ale, because the castle, it was almost destroyed. One should remember how my great-grandfather was saved after during the fighting. During the night of Christmas Eve, my great aunt, she understood German, and at the time the castle was occupied by the German army, and she understood at that time that the day after they will be fired by the Germans. This is what she understood. And she told that to my great-grandfather, and my great-grandfather took the decision not to say anything. They were in the cellar. They were in the cellar at that time, and they were in praying. It was Christmas. You can imagine the conditions. And they knew that the day after they will be fired by the Germans. But at the very beginning of the fighting, it is to say on December the 20th, a soldier coming from Texas, as you, Mr. Clanton, a soldier coming from Texas. He was a little man, not at all tall, but he was in the castle with the fellow US soldiers, and he was speaking with my great-grandfather, and he looked at a photograph, and he said, "Who's there?" And my great-grandfather said, "It is my son. It is my son who was a resistant with other members of the family." They were denounced, so they escaped. Uncle Henry, it was his name, so my great uncle, Henry, he escaped. He go through France, he crossed the Pyrenees mountains, go in Spain, and from Spain he find a way to go in England, where he was he volunteered to integrate the Brigade Biron. Brigade Biron, it is a group of Belgian soldiers in England, and they landed in the last day of July 44 in Normandy at Courseulles. They landed at Courseulles, and Henry and the Brigade Biron they freed Normandy. The mission of the Belgian army at that time was to liberate all the coast of Normandy. That was their mission. After the Normandy fighting, suddenly the way was free, and Brussels was freed in the last days of September 44, and it was possible for Henry one night to come here to say hello to his father and sister, and during one night my great uncle Henry told all the fightings in Normandy, and it is thanks to that night that we know what happened to my uncle Henry, because the day after he integrated once again the Brigade Biron. He participated to the fighting in Holland, and he was killed in October the 2nd in Holland. So you can imagine the state of mind of my grandfather. He just lost his son, and many of his children were engaged in the resistance, so it was a very, very difficult time. À ce moment, vous pouvez imaginer qu'au début de ces combats de 44, donc de décembre 44, mon arrière-grand-père était dans un état déjà de choc à cause de toute la guerre. Yes, I forgot to say one thing that I should say absolutely. Verdenne, here, that place, is also the place where 2 young Jews were hidden during the war. They owe their life to my great-grandfather to welcome that 2 young Jews who were hidden here, and my great-grandfather and other members of the family were recognized as juste parmi les nations. So they were honored by the state of Israel because they protected Jews. Il y a une chose que j'ai oublié de vous mentionner également. Ce lieu est également le lieu où mon arrière-grand-père et les membres de sa famille ont accueilli 2 enfants juifs et les ont cachés pendant la guerre, les ont protégés en tout cas pendant la guerre. Donc voilà un petit peu l'état dans lequel se trouve mon arrière-grand-père. Je reviens à ces combats de décembre 1944. So, in the décembre 1944, c'est la nuit de Noël, tout le monde est en prière. À ce moment-là, ma grande-tante qui parle l'allemand comprend qu'ils seront fusillés par les Allemands le lendemain. Ils passent la nuit en prière dans cet état d'esprit-là. En même temps, ils avaient fait la connaissance d'un jeune soldat texan, donc venant du même état que M. Clanton, à qui ils doivent leur vie. So, coming back in December 44, Christmas Eve, they were all in prayers. They knew that the day after they will be fired. My great-grandfather and my great-aunt knew that they will be fired by the Germans the day after, the night in prayer, of course. And that US soldiers who was somewhere in the surroundings, he said to his commander, we have to go once again to the castle because there are civilians there and we have to free these civilians. So a US patrol came here on December the 26th, okay? And the German who were in the castle, they understood that it was the end for them. So they took the people, the civilians in the cellar, they put them before them, in the cellar, but in front of them, to make a human wall, okay? And with the Germans behind. And the US soldier coming from Texas, he go through the stairs, okay? And he asked the German commander to give up, to surrender, okay? What the German commander did, and he gave his pistols, his weapons to my great grandfather.
Wow.
Donc ici c'était les derniers jours, c'est la nuit de Noël, tout le monde est en prière puisque mon arrière-grand-père comprend qu'il va être fusillé le lendemain. Et à ce moment-là, le soldat texan dont ils avaient fait la connaissance au début des combats se souvient qu'il y a des civils ici, et il prévient son commandant et dit il faut encore une fois aller au château de Verdenne, il y a des civils dans la cave, il faut aller les libérer. Donc ils arrivent ici, les Allemands comprennent que pour eux c'est la fin, et donc ce qu'ils font en ce 26 décembre, c'est qu'ils font un mur humain avec les civils qui étaient dans la cave, ils se placent derrière pour se protéger, le petit soldat texan descend l'escalier et il s'adresse au commandant allemand, donc dans les caves, et il dit rendez-vous, et à ce moment-là le commandant allemand comprend que c'est la fin et il va remettre son pistolet alors à mon arrière-grand-père. At that time, my great aunt, so Germans were made prisoners, and my great aunt understood that the US will kill the prisoners. And my great aunt opposed that because she said, no, this is contrary to the Convention of Geneva. You may not kill your prisoners. But the US GI told the commander, said, no, they have killed so many American soldiers at open, we shall not spare their lives, and the German soldiers were fight very close to the castle. À la fin, donc, les Allemands se rendent et ma grande-tante comprend alors que les Américains vont fusiller les prisonniers allemands. Et ma grande-tante s'y oppose en disant non, c'est contraire à la Convention de Genève, vous ne pouvez pas le faire. Mais à ce moment-là, les Américains disent non, ils ont tué tous nos prisonniers, ils les ont tous tués à Eupen et Malmedy, mais n'ont pas épargné leur vie. Et donc les Allemands, je ne sais pas si je vous dis l'Allemand, seront fusillés ici tout près de Verdenne. And so this is the opportunity for us to remember all the sufferings during that war and all the courage of Mr. Clanton and his fellow soldiers. It was awful fightings during cold. We should remember that at 4 in the afternoon it was completely dark here, so cold, foggy, wet, with a lot of snow. It was white everywhere. So incredible. Il faut se remémorer toutes les souffrances des soldats américains dans ces conditions extrêmement difficiles. C'était nuit à 4 heures de l'après-midi, il y avait du brouillard, il faisait extrêmement froid. At the same time, I should say that the place behind me, it was also my favorite playground. You see the stage there? It was absolutely fabulous for me as a child to go in the castle, and it was not possible to live here, maybe in the summer, but not everywhere. It was marvelous for us and my cousins because you can go from one room to another room without going through the door, because there were holes due to shells everywhere. If you was on the first floor, it was possible, well, there were no more floor, so you can go on the beam like that, okay? So it was a fantastic playground. So that place of suffering for so many soldiers for me, it was marvelous playground, marvelous playground. So you see, it's always with a mix of feelings that I see that place. First of all, of course, a place of suffering. We should remember that after the fighting, it was so cold that the corpse of the soldiers were frozen, and they took the corpse in the castle to, defreeze them. Okay. C'est un lieu évidemment où j'ai des souvenirs mélangés parce que d'abord c'est un lieu évidemment de souffrance. Il faisait tellement froid qu'on devait ramener les cadavres des soldats morts dans le château simplement pour les dégeler et les mettre dans le coffin. En même temps, ça a été un lieu extraordinaire pour moi comme jeune enfant, parce qu'avec mes cousins, on pouvait faire des parties de cache-cache là-dedans absolument merveilleuses. Vous voyez l'état dans lequel se trouvait le château. On passait d'une pièce à l'autre sans passer par la porte, et on faisait de l'équilibre sur les poutres, et il n'y avait plus de sol en dessous. C'était absolument magnifique. So, this is the end of my explanations. And I have a little gift in the name of my aunt Anne. I have a little gift for you, Mr. Clanton.
Oh, thank you.
This is the story of my great-grandfather that I wrote with my cousin Philippe, my late cousin Philippe, who was the husband of Anne. And we were so happy to write this story. So this is exactly, you see the stairs there, it is the stairs there, okay, and you have also a painting made by my great-grandfather of Verdenne. It is the opposite side of the castle. After the war, well, you can see the state of the castle, so my great-uncle decided to lower everything and to consolidate the walls, but it was not possible to keep the castle as such because there were holes due to shells everywhere, and thereafter we shall see some late impacts on the walls, but it was impossible to repair it as it was before the war. So this is this is my great-grandfather there, and my grandmother is just there. So I'm sorry, it's written in English, but you will in French. Sorry, it's written in French. Sorry for that, but you will see here. The fightings here, you have the same photographers there, and you can see many photographs taken after the fightings, and this is even an image taken from strips showing my great-grandfather with my aunt Elizabeth in the cellar with German around there in the cellar. You can see also photographs. You see a tank here. So this is the story. I'm sorry, it's written in French, but we are so happy to present you this book. Well,
thank you very much.
We shall dedicate to you. Anne and I, we shall write a few words for you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Donc voilà.